Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week as we usually do with an album review, going through each track of an album, exploring each song in isolation as well as their part of the larger whole. Today we're going to be checking out our second Genesis album. The first one I checked out was a while ago, which was Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, a double album that quite defeated me by the end of it, though I think I would be more receptive to it today than I was then. Today, though, we're going to be checking out Foxtrot. And what's interesting here is that I have heard half of these tracks already. Half sounds pretty impressive, but it's only a 6-track album, and one of the tracks is less than 2 minutes. I'm going to assume that's some sort of interlude. Everything else is, well, between 5 and 10 minutes, except track 6, which is a 23-minute epic. That is one we have checked out before, Supper's Ready. We've also checked out Get 'Em Out by Friday, and Can Utility and the Coastliners I heard on a live stream. Now, all of this was at least 3 years ago, and Supper's Ready was back in 2020. I honestly don't remember much of any of these, but it'll be interesting if any of it rings a bell for me and I can kind of build off of some ideas I might remember talking about all those years ago. Honestly, that probably won't happen. This will be most likely a semi-fresh listen for me on all accounts. We're going to kick it off with Watcher of the Skies. This one's 7.5 minutes. Let's see how Genesis starts off the album. Yeah, already from the start it has a bit of a larger-than-life feeling to it. A linear chord progression now, after leaving that 2-chord going back and forth at the start. It has a grand scope. We'll see where they go from here, though. Time is just a little loose here, which is typically alright with a solo instrument. Now we're back to the 2-chord vamping from the intro. Oh, and the bass over here too. Got the rhythm section coming in heavy with this rhythm. An accelerando as well. You got a 6-beat phrase. Very djenty for the 70s. The delicate element in the vocals. Has life again destroyed life? Do they play else
swear, do they know more than their childhood games? Maybe the lizard shed his tail. This is the end of man's long union with Earth. Judge not this race by empty remains.
Ooh, very syncopated lines
Judge
here.
God by creatures when they're dead. For now the lizard shedded his tail. This is the end of man's long union with Earth. From life alone to life as one. Think not now, your journey's done.
The vocals, once again, leaning towards a vast scope, where the instrumentation is kind of locked into something static, foundational.
Sadly now your thoughts turn to the stars. Where we've gone, you know you never can
This
go.
melody feels familiar, but I
Watcher of the skies,
don't recognize the melodic
Your
qualities.
fate alone, this fate is your own.
Something mysterious here, unknown. Still paired with an expansive sound though. Oh, that's warm. That is warm and inviting. Yeah, this is very interesting on the basis that a good 90% of this is, maybe a little less because the intro was like a minute and a half without it. A solid majority of this track, though, is the drums, the bass, and the keyboard picking a single note and a single rhythm and leaning into that, bit syncopated, bit complex, very groovy, for the entirety of the track. Sometimes this pitch changes, sometimes there's modification to it, such as during the first vocal section, We have the bass lick that is the rhythm, da 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 dun dun dun, and then we bounce between ba da da dum. We have a little bit, not necessarily melody, but we have pitched movements. This happens all over the place, where a portion of the riff will be this textured rhythmic idea, and then another portion of it will be something with pitched movement to it. Sometimes things more melodic, sometimes like that, just picking a higher note to come back down from. The drums don't have that though, they pretty much just stick to the pattern, and well, when the keyboard joins in on the bass, we tend to hear the same idea, the same lick from the keyboard as well. I jokingly called this Djent much earlier in the track, but having listened to the full thing, yeah, dude, this is Proto Djent, 100%. I'm kind of curious. I know Djent tends to get drawn back to an origin point of Meshuggah, but is there any chance that Meshuggah was directly or indirectly influenced by Watcher of the Skies? Because there's so much of this track that feels like what Meshuggah and those inspired by them would eventually do. In fact, having the keyboard play these chords on top of this, creating this atmosphere on top of this rhythm, that's kind of the exact definition of what Tesseract tends to do with their music. Now, in no way would I walk away from this and say, hey, this is a Djent track, but I think it's really interesting to see the parallels of what this song used as a component versus what the Djent genre focuses on almost to exclusivity. There is a really interesting line that can be drawn between these two, and I'd love to know, once again, if this influence or this sound ever influenced bands moving forward into the modern day Djent sound. Subjectively, though, I do find it to be maybe the weakest part of the track. I found that too often it relied on it, and the idea in and of itself got a little tired for me. But that's just me in general. In general. The genre has always not really been too interesting for me. I prefer other elements to be present. And when we do have elements here that are other than that, I do find that the song works best. There are sections in here where we have the vocals singing. Really cool melodies there. Also a bit rhythmic and syncopated there. The chorus is a wild rhythm that honestly doesn't work in the way that speech and general cadence does with words and sentence structure and emphasized syllables. But the way that he sings it, I mean, this is one of the cool things about singing is that it doesn't necessarily need to follow what would be normal in speech. And I think this is a very extreme example of that, where it works in music, but if you ever said the sentence, it's the first sentence of the repeated section. I'm going to call it a chorus since I think musically it is, but lyrically I don't believe it is. It's the part at the end of the track when I said, hey, this part sounds familiar, but I don't remember these words. That section right there. It is wildly stilted and rhythmically obtuse. We start off holding out a few notes and then rush the end of it as if we had just realized what we wanted to say and maybe we were running out of breath and wanted to say it all in one breath. We just had to get it all out. It's awkward, but it works in the music. And I find that those sections are very cool because they tie into some of the rhythmic devices that are so prevalent on this track while also being melody, melodic ostinato, being parts of the track that we can hum. I suppose you can hum the rhythm of this too, and it is what creates most of the groove in this track, but to me, aside from being a memorable component, isn't anything that I'm personally going to be humming or whistling throughout my day. The melodies of this, the vocal parts, absolutely though. They are infectious while still being a fair bit complex too. It adds a lot to this and is a great bridge between the rhythmic stylings of the rhythm section and the atmospheric stylings of all of the chord progressions, a lot of the keyboard work going on in here. They're the midpoint that ties these two extremes together. To draw my last conclusion, or my last parallel, very similar to Tesseract again. But I do find that the vocals are key for me enjoying this track. There is the other instrument though. It's the keyboard. I find this to be really interesting because I find that it's very different from what the rest of the track is exploring generally. The vocals are dynamic. I can't really say that they are one thing. Some places are more docile, some are more delicate and quiet, others are belted. The melody lines themselves, the note choices also create different feelings within them. Some are tender and vulnerable, others are bombastic, and at times there's even some melody lines from the vocals and from the guitar that explore this grandiose scheme, this grand scale that this song wants to lean towards in a majority of this. So the vocals kind of do a lot. They're constantly exploring the vibe of the moment. But the rhythm section, the bass and the drums, and occasionally the keyboard, they're all foundation. There is very little movement to them at all. As I mentioned, most of the time it's pick a note and just rhythmically bounce around on it. They're not adventurous. They're not exploratory. They're really not even informational. They are the foundation. They're what everything is built upon. And I find it really interesting when the keyboards tend to go into this grander scope of just how different that is from the rhythm section, where the rhythm section is a home and the keyboards are creating an atmosphere of vast potential, of infinite possibility, of a large journey, of immeasurable scope of information. I don't even know. It's just a largeness. It is so big. And that compared to the da 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 dun dun da dun dun da da dun da 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 dun dun da dun, it's so there's such a gap there. I find that to be really interesting, and I think that's actually by design. It's not just a song of vastness. It presents a home so we can know how far we have gone. If you've ever seen a film or read a book where characters go on a journey and they may wind up on a large hill or a mountain or something and look back and they can see a speck of their house, maybe their home, and it gives you the scope. They are now this far away from the only place they've ever known, this far away from comfort of familiarity. I think that's what the baseline element is supposed to represent here. It is a foundation to create the center of the track. So when we go so far away from it, we can really see how far we've gone. Because otherwise, these two parts are incredibly distinct and have very little to do with one another. One is holding out notes, another is playing several notes. One is really only emphasizing the first beat of a bar. The other one is emphasizing all sorts of wild beats and all sorts of parts of the bar. One is harmonically exploring not just interesting chords themselves, but interesting chord progressions. And the other is just locking into a single note and deviating very little from that. So what makes sense to me is that the purpose of putting them together is to show the contrast. And I think that that works really well at delivering this feeling of scope. To show the center and to show the edges simultaneously so you can see just how much space is between them. And I guess that element there kind of ties everything else into the picture too. We end and begin with these linear chord progressions that start out a bit smaller in scope and then push towards a grand scale over time. It's kind of that same idea of going on a journey. I think it's interesting that as we get to the end of the track, we begin to introduce more and more dissonance into the sound. There's friction in here that we haven't really explored much of on the track. And this friction eventually evolves into an incredibly resolute chord of finality. It is a true ending, as true of a musical ending as you can really create. I think the lead up into it was a little rough, though still by design, but the final note is incredibly stable after listening to several chords that teeter on instability. I'm not sure necessarily what that represents, other than on the idea of this being a journey. This is the final act. It's where the protagonist must go through their toughest trial in order to accomplish whatever the task itself is. I don't know if that's necessarily what this song is aiming for, but the concept of journeys, of distance, of scope, they're all kind of synonymous, even if they aren't necessary, even if this song in particular isn't talking about a specific journey. I think we can still kind of view that idea through the lens of this music. But I don't think every part of this track harmonically stood out to me and was easily understood. There were a couple of instrumental sections in here that felt like they were just doing stuff. I don't mean that too negatively, but we had the instrumental intro, which was just a nice way of introducing the scope of the song. Then we had a vocal part. Then we had an instrumental part, which I thought was well done. I didn't really get any new information out of it. I felt like being the first instrumental part after the intro, it might have been pushing the story forward, but I didn't really feel that. It just sort of carried on what the vocal part was doing with an instrument. We didn't get new information, but we got to see a new perspective on this vibe we had already been exploring. We do another vocal part. There's an instrumental part here, which seemed a bit subversive at times, breaking down in scope a little bit. It seems to be the inverse of the first non-intro instrumental part. And then we came back for another vocal part, and then the instrumental outro, which had a section in it that I felt meandered just a little bit. Just kind of focusing on the drum and the bass and the keyboard playing the pattern. The pattern, I mean, granted, we had heard a few of them, but this idea has been fairly prevalent for the entirety of this runtime. I don't think we needed a full section of just it. Though, again, like I said, this sort of rhythmic focus of music isn't usually my favorite, and having already heard so much of it, focusing back on it here, it's probably just a very subjective take on that moment. From here, though, we go into the outro, which, yeah, very cool. Add in some tension, resolve everything, feel good on the way out. But I did find that some of the instrumental stuff just never quite clicked for me. It was cool, and none of it was bad in a disruptive way. It just, I feel like the pacing of the track could have been just a little bit better. Regardless, I quite enjoyed this song. I'm hoping that, well, actually, I kind of know that this isn't what's completely in store for us, because Get 'Em Out by Friday was not like this from what I remember. And Supper's Ready was a massive suite of like 20 different styles and sounds. So we might hear some more of this rhythmic focused Proto Djent again, if you will allow me to call it that. We might hear some more of that in Supper's Ready, but I don't believe it's going to be a dominant sound in there. Though again, that was 6 years ago. I really don't remember much of that song. I just remember there was a lot of it. Let's hit some lyrics on this one and see what's going on with what even the title, Watcher of the Skies, kind of implies a vastness of scope. Watcher may be even interpreted as a like a warden of, not just someone who views, but oversees. And overseeing the entirety of the sky is pretty big in scope. I think that the grand scale of this track fits well with even just the title. But let's see where the lyrics take us and see if all of this ties together some way neatly. This track is about an entity that watches over all. It says, Watcher of the skies, watcher of all, his is a world alone, no world is his own. So he doesn't belong to any world in particular, but he does observe them all. It says that life no longer surprises him. And then it talks about the passing of humanity. It says, creatures shape this planet's soil, now their reign has come to end. Has life again destroyed life? Do they play elsewhere? Do they know more than their childhood games? This is the end of man's long union with Earth. That phrase, the end of man's union with Earth, shows up quite a few times on this track. It is about an outside observer looking at this planet now devoid of mankind, humanity. It does kind of imply all life. It says that there's not much left here, but I would assume that if humanity were gone, life would thrive without us. I don't think it would be quite as boring as the song implies, so maybe it is a death of all life on this planet. It says, from life alone to life as one. Think not now your journey's done, for though your ship be sturdy, no mercy has the sea. Will you survive on the ocean of being? So it says, even though you're alone now, there's nothing left to observe, that doesn't mean that your life is over. There's still other troubles at sea, other hurdles to your journey. There's still things to do. It says, though, sadly now your thoughts turn to the stars. Where have we gone? You know you can never go. Watcher of the skies, watcher of all, this is your fate alone. So I wonder then, a lot of this seems to be about the death of humanity. But here it seems as if humanity has left for the stars and abandoned the planet for just this one observer to be alone on. I'm not really quite sure how this final stanza lines up with everything else. It seems to imply something totally different, but this idea of having a grand scope, of being able to see all, I think is showcased quite a bit in this track. The finality at the end of the song is interesting too, because the penultimate stanza, which granted is still like 2 or 3 minutes prior to the song ending, mentions that there's still so much more ahead of you, even though there's nothing left to observe here. But then the song ends with a strong sense of finality, as if the journey is over. So I'm not too sure where all of this lines up. If you have your own interpretation of this, let me know. Put that down in the comments. As usual, I'm always open to seeing other people's interpretations and expanding my own understanding of the music that we listen to here. We're going to move on to the shortest track, barring the what I'm going to assume is an interlude. This one's called Timetable. Little Baroque inspiration there. It started off a little rocky, but this feels very familiar to me.
Tells a tale of times when kings and queens sipped wine from goblets of gold, and the brave would
Very interesting listening to the harmony shift from Baroque to pop.
to arms cool. A time of valor and legends born, a time when honor meant much more to a man than life, and the days knew only strife to tell right from wrong through lance and sword. Why can we never be sure till we die?
The bass line through this whole track has been great.
Why do we suffer each race to believe that no race has been grander? It seems because through time and space, though names may change, each face retains the masked wall.
beautiful, especially with the bass dancing around it too.
A dusty table,
A feeling of release there.
musty smells, tarnished silver lies discarded upon the floor. Only feeble light descends through a film of grey that scars the panes. Gone the carving and those who left their mark.
Oh, a little bit of wistfulness there. The vocals doing the same rhythm as the bass. As old as they. Why can we never be sure till we die, or have killed for an answer? Why do we suffer each race to believe that no race has been grander? It seems because through time and space, though names may change, each face retains the mask it wore. I think that's the same piano part, but it's still beautiful. Is it going to fade out on the repeat? All right. Yeah, very interesting. Coming off of the scope, size, grandeur, and energy of Watcher of the Skies into Timetable, which is a fairly straightforward ballad here. A massive drop in energy. But I suppose that the pacing on this album and any sort of diversity across styles needs to happen quickly. You figure a traditional modern album is somewhere between 10 to 15 tracks. You can spend a few songs within a sound and the album doesn't feel like it's dragging. But here, with only 6 tracks, you don't have a lot of time to stay on an idea. So having a ballad on track 2 is an interesting choice, but then you realize that, well, the ballad is 10% into the album. It really doesn't, actually it's over 10%. Yeah, give it 7 minutes out of 50 minutes. Yeah, no, it's over. Yeah. What I'm saying is we got quite a bit into the album percentage-wise, even if track 2 is kind of an unusual place to pull the energy back. It might feel more immediate on an album full of shorter tracks, but here it feels right. It feels, well, it feels fine. I think I probably would have gone another track of energy. But also looking at the length of these tracks, they seem to have a pattern there too. A longer one, a shorter one, a longer one, a shorter one, and then the big epic. So maybe they wanted to keep that pacing as well. Through that idea of being one of the shorter tracks on this album, it's also the most focused. Watcher of the Skies went through a few different vibes. This one didn't. This one's pretty locked in on a sound throughout. Now, granted, we do have some variety. We have a middle-paced verse, a quicker chorus, and a slower bridge, maybe. Well, there's a vocal part on the slower section too. Maybe like a post-chorus and then an instrumental bridge, which is where that beautiful piano part comes in. And we would just repeat this set of 4 ideas again. It's split pretty much directly down the middle: verse, chorus, post-chorus, bridge. And musically, they are all consistent. The 2 bridges, the 2 choruses, the 2 verses are the same. What's different seems to be only the words being sung between them. The opening verse is, well, it feels ballady. It isn't until later we realize this is sort of a midpoint tempo-wise, but coming off of Watcher of the Skies, it's already a little down-tempo and introspective too. There's a softness here that we didn't really find too much of in Watchers of the Sky. You can hear it in the beautiful, almost lyrical bass work there. It's just very smooth, moving between ideas, legato style. It's the lightness and levity in the drums. It's almost a lack of electric guitar. It is there, but it is quiet. It really isn't until the chorus, when we have a swell up, we bring the tempo and intensity up, that the electric guitar becomes a more prominent instrument. And it's all just light. You listen to the vocals and there's something reassuring and calming about them, but there's also a general wistfulness throughout this. I would not be surprised if this track, at least in portions of it, peered back to the past. That may be where the ballad element comes in, not necessarily a melancholy, but not something energetic or positive or joyful either. From here we go to the chorus, which is, it's a push and pull thing. We have a more driven part. It's these heavy emphasis beats on the beats, and then a little bit of emphasis on syncopation in order to drive into those. We only get 4 or 8 of those hits from the drums before we kind of lighten things back up. We keep the increased tempo, but we kind of bring the vibes back to the verse as far as intensity and color and energy. We do the same length there, then we push back to the driven part, and then we kind of pull the reins back a little bit. This is interesting because it does feel ceremonial. Maybe not celebratory, but it is larger in scope while still retaining some of this wistfulness. And then we have something super wistful. We bring the energy down even lower than the verse. There's like 2 vocal lines, but it takes like 20 seconds to get through all of it. It just takes its time. It's an incredibly patient moment. The whole energy of the song just plummets though. And then from here we hit the instrumental bridge, which I find so infectious. I did think it was a little overplayed at the end. Once again, a bit of an indulgent finale, much like Watcher of the Skies, although that was more of a penultimate section I found to be a bit indulgent. But the first time through this section, I was enamored. Absolutely loved it. Sometimes familiarity is the worst thing you can have. Better just to keep beautiful moments as a moment rather than something you continue to delve into. Regardless, though, the piano part is a gorgeous idea full of space. I think that's the first thing I really noticed. We have a couple of rhythmic hits on a single note, lots of space between them, and then the melody starts to flow out, but not in a way that piano typically is, where you can just keep going. It's not like an aerophone where you have to put air through it and thus the performer needs to breathe, which indicates space between phrases. But it is played more like a saxophone or a trumpet idea, where you'll get a burst of notes and then a couple of beats of rest, and then a burst of notes and a couple beats of rest. And I found that to be really nicely done. It creates a pacing and, once again, a patience to this. But it feels introspective, the beauty of a remembered moment or something like that. And I found this to be an incredibly poignant point of the track. It just feels like it ties up every single theme that they've been exploring into one sound. And what I loved even more about it, and I don't know if it's thematically relevant, but at least from a musical standpoint, the way the bass dances with the piano is just immaculate. Playing in some of the spaces that the piano leaves, playing along with the piano at places, the bass also pauses in sections as well, allowing the piano to shine through there. It's very much a give and take. They get to shine together at times, but also individually as well. And it's just a gorgeous moment. It does loop into itself well, but I also really liked the finale of it at the end of the first bridge. As we're kind of rising in intensity, slowly resolving until we hit that really warm, resonant tone at the top. And then the verse came back in, but I thought that was just a gorgeous way to end it. And for that to be the same note that it starts on and then to just loop back into it, I found that to be less subjectively good. If this track is about loops and cycles, the way that things, there's no such thing as an ending, it's just a new beginning kind of idea. I can see that working really well. That pairs well with the fade out as well, that these are just cycles. It will go on forever and ever and ever. The song doesn't end. We just choose to stop listening to it. In a sense, I mean, it's not like we can stop this from fading out. But the idea is that it just goes on forever. And I think that tying the looped phrase into the fade out works really well, but I just found that it weakened that note's ability to be as resonant and powerful as it was, which again could be thematically accurate, but for my listening experience, I really enjoy the way it concludes things rather than the way it loops things. I found that to be just a little less entertaining and engaging for me. But yeah, I don't have much else to add to this one. It's a ballad. It's a little sappy at times. It seems very much concerned with the past, very wistful, but gorgeous and beautiful, and as usual, strong composition and arrangement. So let's check out some lyrics on this one, and then we get to dive back into Get 'Em Out by Friday, which I remember enjoying a few years back. I'm a bit perplexed by these lyrics. Verse 1 and verse 2 seem rather clear, but the chorus which ties them together is a little more obtuse. The first verse talks about the times of kings and queens when they sipped wine from goblets of gold. Talks about times of valor and legends when honor was the most important thing to a person and when we knew right from wrong through combat. Verse 2 then talks about the time past this dusty tables, tarnished lies, feeble lights, carvings are gone, kings and queens are gone, now there is only rats. The weak must die according to nature's law. I've been trying to figure out why. The first one seems to look back on these older medieval times with rose-tinted glasses, while the second verse seems to talk about how even they are beholden to time themselves, that even if you look back on them fondly, they are still the past. We don't do things that way anymore. That they even eventually fell. Is it in love with this time period, with this layers of control? Or does it view it as a necessary stepping stone to get where we were now? I would assume that the chorus would explain that, but I'm not really sure what it's trying to say. It says, why can we never be sure until we die or have killed for an answer? Why do we suffer each race to believe that no race has been grander? It seems because through time and space, though names may change, each face retains the mask it wore. The final line seems to imply that life history, it's cyclical. Names and faces may change, but the roles they play don't. The rising and falling of prolific cultures, groups of people, cities, empires, it happens consistently. The battles that are waged are kind of the same story all over. Details might be changed, but the roles have been the same. Across millennia, these stories have been told. Or not even stories, these events have happened. In that case, maybe we're not specifically looking at the medieval monarchic idea. We're looking at any time period, any era of any culture. Parts of them can be glamorous, but not all are, and all of them have been moved away from. But what does the chorus mean? Why can we never be sure until we die or have killed for an answer? What's the question that we're seeking an answer to? And why does death have to be involved? I assume the first part, we can't be sure until we die, has to do with some sort of afterlife belief of the songwriter. But how would you also find this information by killing another? Unless the information is who's the best, which is sort of what the second line refers to. Why do we suffer each race to believe that no race has been grander? It is certainly alluding to a hierarchy of people. The scope I'm not too sure of, but the use of race makes me think it's the entire human race. But also the idea of ranking races could be different from viewing all of humanity as a race and more of the social race. Where you come from on this planet. But the idea also of knowing when we die or when we kill goes back to the opening verse. The days when only strife to tell right and wrong through lance and sword. If you killed someone, you were better than them. So is this chorus saying that whoever kills another is immediately better, that we now know? Or is it talking about war and combat in general, particularly with that post-chorus? If it's supposed to be condemning the ways that we have dictated prosperity through power historically, and well, I mean, honestly, even still today, I don't feel that the music condemns it the same way that the lyrics would. The music is wistful. It looks back for a past it wishes it could be a part of. The opening verse leans into that really well. If the music had shifted for the second verse, I think I could buy this condemning of this narrative, but it doesn't. The song continues to persist with this nostalgic sound. It is a ballad, though, and I do feel general tints of negativity, some sort of, well, not melancholy outright, but maybe something bittersweet, a negativity tied to this wistfulness. I don't know. I kind of get the gist of what it's nudging towards, but I'm not sure how it's referring to it. Much like Watcher in the Sky, I would love to hear some of y'all's interpretations of this and kind of have a better grasp of what they're trying to tell here. Well, that said, we're going to move into Get 'em Out by Friday. If you want to see my original reaction, particularly maybe even after you watch this one, I'll put it up there. You can check that out. Maybe if you want to compare and contrast how 3 years difference has me relating to this track differently, or maybe even the same. Let's dive into it. It's a very fast 3, but it's probably a slower 4. The playfulness with the tempo and then exploding into this reminds me a lot of the Mars Volta. It's that funky bass line, dude. It is tying all these ideas together.
After all this time, they ask us to leave.
You know, flute's a nice addition
And I
here.
told them we could pay double the rent.
I love how rhythmically this is a bit displaced too.
I don't know why it seems so funny.
It's a stilted rhythm, particularly with this guitar part.
Seeing as how they take more money. The Winkler called again. He came here this morning with £400 and a photograph of the place he has found.
The flute is interesting. It's presenting a sound of ease against all of this.
Block of flats with central heating. I think we're going to find it hard. Now we've got them. I've always said that. Cash, cash, cash. Don't do anything well. Work can be rewarding. When a flash of intuition is a gift that helps you excel. Here we are in Hollow New Town. Did you recognize your block across the square? Over there. Sadly, since last time we spoke, we found we've had to raise the rent again. Just a bit. Oh no, this I can't believe. Oh, Mary, and we agreed to leave.
Such an aggressive tone. So dreary. A lot of downward momentum through this entire section. Oh!
This is an announcement from genetic control.
That counterpoint was gorgeous, as short-lived as it was.
I hear the directors of genetic control. I've been buying all the properties that have recently been sold, taking risks so bold. It said now that people will be shorter in height, they can fit twice as many in the same building site. They say it's alright, beginning with the tenants of the town of Harlow. In the interest of humanity, they've been told they must go, told they must go, 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 go. I think I fixed a new deal. A dozen properties we buy and buy and sell at 34. Some are still inhabited. It's time to send the wings, let us see them. We'll have to work some more. With land in your hand, you'll be happy on earth. Then invest in the church for your heaven.
Yeah, I don't think I remembered much of that. The chorus, vaguely. The higher energy, bouncy element to it, but the incredibly dreary second half of this was not expecting that, or didn't remember it. Didn't even ring a bell getting to that point. But I will tell you though, I remembered the lyrics. This story stuck with me over the past few years. It's one of those that just hearing the title, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember what that song's about generally, even if I don't remember the specifics about it. And I even right now, I still only have a vague notion about people who are renting and they got kicked out so that they could put different people in at a higher price or something like that. Typical landlord stuff. um, but even just having that vague notion of what the song's about, I think helps me interpret some of the decisions in here even stronger than previously. Because the thing with Genesis, and this is something that I bring up a lot of the times when I talk about them, is that they're almost theatrical. There's a part of them that I feel would adapt well to musical theater, of having a visual component. Maybe not even just exclusively musical theater, but even film or animated film. Something like Fantasia, I think, would do really well with their work, because so much of what I associate with Genesis is storytelling. they don't just make riffs that sound neat. They don't just sing catchy melodies. They put visual ideas, they put stories to music. And it's one of my growing pains with them as a group is just how often their music can feel a bit random at times because they have a vision of what the music's supposed to be telling. And if you aren't locked into at least your own vision of the story, but certainly if you're not locked into theirs, some of their changes can be nonsensical. I mean, even just coming out of the ballad well, not really a ballad, just the low energy, dreary part of this track back into the chorus is jarring. It kind of makes sense now that I know what the song is talking about. This is supposed to be a jarring track in general. But even knowing that, it still caught me off guard. Just 40 seconds to go, and we're just going to flip a switch and go somewhere else completely. And it's one of those situations where first time listens are just not going to be something that is easily understood. I think you can enjoy a first time listen of a lot of Genesis. You can know in your gut, dude, I like this. I want to dig into it. But as far as understanding, I feel like they can be difficult to grasp. They have too much depth to them. And certainly from my perspective too, where I typically don't listen to lyrics when I check out music in this format because I'm so focused on what the music is trying to tell me that I'm missing a lot of information. I'm not going to say that Genesis relies heavily on their on their lyrics. They have plenty of instrumentation within these tracks that is designed to push the narrative forward, that will tell the story without any words attached to it. But I feel like the words are very important in relaying the information in the moments where they're used. Something like Watchers in the Sky was a bit more straightforward. I got the gist of it just through the instrumentation, and the lyrics tended to line up with my experience with the music. But something like this that has 3, maybe 4 incredibly distinct ideas that we're just rapidly jumping between them, it can feel more chaotic than I think it's really supposed to be about. And if you can follow the story, I think it makes a bit more sense and it jumps around and teleports less often. With that said, those harsh jumps I think are supposed to be purposeful. If I remember correctly, we are jumping between perspectives. We have the dreary and sympathetic tenets of this place that are being kicked out, and we're supposed to sympathize with them. And those moments are supposed to feel more vulnerable musically. The entire dreary section, I assume, is them having to leave their home or apartment or whatever. These sections are rather grounded and rooted, but also slow. There's a dragging of their feet. This is something they don't want to do. Whereas the incredibly upbeat section is, if I remember correctly, told through the perspective of the landlords. They're trying to rush everybody out. It makes sense for those sections to be higher energy. And the contrast between these two is incredibly felt. Sometimes I do think these transitions could use a little bit more nuance. It's a little bit of movement to help us move between perspectives, but it's also the smashing of the two sides together that gives us such strong juxtaposition between them and really allows us to feel how vastly different these two perspectives are. And I think that works really well. There's also the bridge. I actually don't know the structure to this track. There's certainly a type of verse chorus thing at the beginning, but around the 3 or 4 minute mark, it began to move in more of a linear direction, and I'm really not sure how I would break that up. But there is the dreary part that comes in later, and this feels very slow. There's not a lot going on here. In fact, it starts off not really interesting at all. It introduces this lower energy, heavier, drearier section of the track, but I feel like the introduction hangs around for just a hair bit too long. But again, I think that's purposeful too. The purpose is to put us into the mindset of these people, maybe even packed up. One last look over the shoulder at the place you've been living for so long that you wanted to continue calling home. It is sad because of the loss of housing, of having a roof over your head. It's also sad because this was a place that has memories for you that you won't be able to revisit. But there's also a fear for the future. If I remember, all the landlords were doing this, and so prices were rising universally around this town or something like that. And so the prospect of finding a place like this at a price point like this is pretty much zero. So it's sad for the present, the past, and the future all simultaneously. That really drags this moment down. Once again, I think it's a point to be sympathetic towards our protagonist here. The way that all that is done to tell this story with so little words is quite effective. And I do think some of the more jarring elements would probably work better with a visual thing, but they do try their best to create sonic differentiations too, such as the landlord. Why do I keep saying landlords? The landlords being panned and having different voices, little different changes to the way that's being sung, just to create some different sonic texture to each of these and how they differ from the primary singing voice of our protagonist. There's also the spoken word part, which feels very corporate because it sounds like it's over a speakerphone or some sort of announcement speaker. And so all of those elements go a great way in sort of delivering the narrative through sonic means. These little details that I might have picked up last time around for this track, but didn't really mean anything to me because I didn't understand the larger context. I just understood that the vocalists were having fun with it, I think is what my takeaway was. But yeah, it's just incredibly theatric. It's narratively driven. To me, this is more of what I expect from Genesis than the previous two tracks, which are, as I mentioned, a little bit more focused. They certainly have their defined sections of the music, but they're also not like this. This is wild shifts and jumps between sounds. Now, I do want to I brought up the bass a lot. I brought up the vocals. We have some really cool harmonies in here, which I just want to state. Love vocal harmonies. They're killing it on this track. There is a cool bit of counterpoint in here. Honestly, I can't remember where it was or what instruments it was. There was a lot of music in this track, but I really enjoyed that. But what I haven't really brought up much at all yet is the drummer. And I think part of that is because the drums are a bit subdued on the previous two tracks as they were introspective. A lot of looking towards the past on those, the grandiose ideas of Watcher of the Skies. They were focusing, and probably, I guess in a better phrase, they needed a more stable drum part. Something to just lock into an idea and be a foundation, especially with Watchers of the Sky, laying into that rhythmic device along with the bass, but Timetable was more of a standard track and just needed that solid ground for the song to be built on top of. This one, though, is rhythmically complex, not in a way that Watchers of the Skies was, but in a way that creates rhythmic instability. Watchers of the Skies was incredibly groovy. Was it a choppy rhythm? Yes, but it worked. Here, the choppiness is designed to create uneven footing. It's kind of difficult to get into the groove of this track in certain places. And I really think a lot of that has to do with the instability of the life of our protagonist. These type of choppy rhythms didn't show up in the big bombastic sections, they showed up in the smaller, more intimate moments. I believe primarily when the protagonist was singing. And so it's about how their life is crumbling. You know, they're kind of losing their shelter. They're losing their housing. That's not a really stable point in someone's life. And I think the rhythmic element's supposed to showcase that, but the drummer really takes it to the next level. The bass, once again, is helping them out with these choppier rhythms, but the drummer is really incorporating these neat little melodic ideas, tons of drum fills in here. It's a rather expressive display of drum work while still retaining these core grooves throughout. And I think this is the first time on this album that the drum work has really stood out to me in an elongated way. There have been moments in other tracks where I'm like, dude, that was a killer fill, but it's just that. It is a small moment for the drummer to stand out. And that's simply because the songs didn't need wild drum work. And that's something that I've always enjoyed about Genesis. Is that they tend to write for the music, not for themselves. They're not trying to show off. They're not trying to be guitar gods or drum gods or anything like that. Everything is in service to the story. They have the chops to back up any wild composition they come up with. But if the story is supposed to be smaller, if it's supposed to be static, if it's supposed to be consistent, they will absolutely lean into that less complex writing, because it's what the art requires. And so this, I think, is the first time I've really heard the drummer go off in a wild way. And Genesis drummer, this is Phil Collins, right? I've heard some crazy stuff from him before. Nothing on this album so far has matched that. I can't remember what that song was either. I think it was one with Phil on vocals too. Editor Bryan will figure it out. I'll throw that link up there if you're interested in watching that one. But this, I think, still showcases a lot of really cool technical elements from Phil there. Is there anything else I want to add to this? I don't think so. This is a really cool, it's not really a suite, but it is a bunch of distinct ideas that we end up kind of cycling back to some of. But in order to tell, once again, a very theatric story, there's cinema in mind, I believe, when this was created. And I think that, I mean, at least that feels right to me, because when I listen to it, I can see the story being played out in my mind. That doesn't happen with all music, but it certainly happens with a lot. This is just a very clear image, though. Let's hit some lyrics. All right. And yeah, lyrically, it's pretty much what I remember here. We have the first verse. I represent a firm of gentlemen who recently purchased this house and all the others in the road. In the interest of humanity, we found a better place for you to go, 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 go. And then we have the tenet. It says, oh, I can't believe this. They're asking us to leave. The chorus is consistent throughout. Get them out by Friday. There's always money to be made if we can get these people to leave faster. The chorus itself changes every time, but the gist is always the same. And it also talks a little bit about the corruption from the side of the landlords. At the second chorus, it says, you can squeeze a little grease and our troubles will soon run away. So as long as we know the right people to slide some money to, any problems that we have with kicking these people out, they kind of disappear, don't they? Verse 2 looks at our tenets, says, they asked us to leave. I told them we could pay double. It's kind of funny how they won't accept more money. But at the end of the day, it's not about what they can get out of one person. They would need everybody to double their rent. Because, as we see in the interlude, an announcement from Genetic Control, there is now a 4-foot restriction on the height of people who live here. That is because they can fit twice as many people in the same size of a building. which means they can get twice as much money across the entirety of this place, or of all of these houses, or whatever they're renting out. We also have the bridge. It says, here we are now in Harlow, New Town. Did you recognize your block across the square over there? Sadly, since last time we spoke, we found we've had to raise the rent again, just a bit. Oh, that's not from the tenant's perspective. That's from the landlord's. This is a new landlord, though. They had to raise the rent again. And our tenants say, I can't believe this. Oh, Mary, we have agreed to leave. This feeling of being kicked out once again. It creates a cycle of tenants where you had something pretty good, but now you're kicked out and must find something else. But the deals everywhere else, the costs to live in any of these places between utility and presumably rent here, it's higher than your last place. And that's because the tenants in that place were kicked out so that they could raise those rents. And as everyone gets kicked out and shuffled around to other houses and apartment complexes or flats, since this is Genesis, you get kicked out of a good deal and you move into a higher priced one. One that probably was the same cost as yours previously, but they needed to jack the prices up. So they cut the leases, kick the people out, and new people get to come in. And it just creates this cycle of rising costs. It is very unfortunate. And I think that the interlude towards the end with the spoken word segment over the speaker box is really the height of the removal of humanity from this entire thing. People no larger than 4 feet can now live in these houses because we can put twice as many people in them. It's no longer, and well, has it ever really been about the people? Has it been about supplying a service, or has it just been greed? This entire track, I mean, even from the very beginning, it's really been about that greed. We have the second, third chorus, one of them in there. It says, now we've got him. I've always said that. Cash, cash, cash. It can do anything well. This feeling of just wanting more, of money dominating every element of this, even though we are supplying a human service. We're providing a place for people to live. Now, this completely ignores the entire concept of owning houses, which is more relevant today than maybe ever, with the constant scooping up by BlackRock of individual family homes and renting them out. But the general idea behind this is the same. We're 50 years away from when this album came out, and this story is just as relevant today as it's ever been. And I find that to be incredibly depressing, but it's interesting that it lines up with Timetable, that the names may change, but the masks that the faces wear are the same that they've always been. By the end of this, it says, with land in your hand, you'll be happy on earth, then invest in the church for your heaven, to imply that land is supposed to make you happy. But since no one is allowed to own any land here because it's all owned by landlords and renters, the best you can do is invest in the afterlife. And of course, that's tithing to a church, and depending on your religious and spiritual views, that may be money wasted as well, and maybe even giving money to a group of greedy people. Also, it's just all a big ruse. And now it's time to head into the penultimate track, if you will. It's technically 2 tracks. We're going to look at tracks 4 and probably 5, since the last thing I want to do is tack an extra 2 minutes onto the final 23-minute song. I'm hoping that 5 doesn't go into 6, though. This one's called Can Utility and the Coastliners. Let's dive in.
The scattered pages of a book by the sea,
Beautiful guitar work.
held by the sand, washed by the waves. A shadow forms, cast by a cloud, skimming by as eyes of the past. But the rising tide absorbs them, effortlessly claiming. They told of one who
That was a fun little combination
singing
between the guitar and
praise him,
vocals.
praise him. We heed not flatterers, he cried.
Oh, the keyboards are under here as well.
Waters retreat, show my power, halted my feet, but the cause was lost. Now cold winds blow far from the north. All the coast rang
Oh, dude, a little bit of tension coming in there.
the storm.
Playful bit of darkness.
Rage and scorn. The waves surround the sinking throne, singing, crown him, crown him. Those who love our majesty show themselves, all bent their knee.
See, and this is a good showcase of the drums, once again, kind of getting out of the way of the song. Yeah.
But he forced a smile even though his hopes they dashed where offerings fell. Where they fell.
Everyone gets a little chance to show off. Ooh. Playful accent pattern.
Nothing can my peace destroy as long as none smile.
This staccato keyboard part is wild.
They dared to laugh
Bit of a stilted rhythm there.
Sweet little mouse, his face turning red. Though he's staring at the door, you can tell he's dead.
A lot of grit in the vocals there. All right, we are going to pause it there then, since it doesn't transition over. All right. I don't know, maybe the interlude track is also self-contained, and we can just talk about that when it's over. This was a wild track right here. And in a lot of ways, I think that it's just as adventurous as something like Get 'Em Out by Friday, but more cohesive. Instead of jumping around between 3 to 4 different styles completely, we have 3 or 4 main concepts. The verse is a bit different from the chorus. And then we had 2 instrumental interludes, which is kind of wild for a track this short. They crammed so much instrumental work into this one. But I feel like just like Get 'Em Out by Friday, which uses the instrumental parts to drive the song forward, we see the same thing here. Very different from Timetable, which was heavily focused on the vocals above all else. That was a track that didn't really have any, I mean, we did have the one instrumental part in the bridge, because it was like verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus, bridge. But it wasn't linear. It was a set idea that we heard the second time through that as well. This is more of that linear instrumental exploration, allowing the melodies from these instruments to tell the story and push the track forward. But it's just more cohesive. All of the sections, while being unique, feel connected. They feel like they're all speaking the same language. They're all within the same atmosphere. That they all have similar vibes, and there's foundational components that are consistent through them. They all feel like they're in conversation with one another rather than wildly jumping between different perspectives. And I think for that reason, so far, Can Utility is my favorite track of the album. And it dethrones Get 'Em Out by Friday by a small margin, but enough to easily slot it into that first place slot. We still have to get through Supper's Ready. I remember that one being a bit more disjointed, but I also vaguely remember it. Well, actually, I had the person who requested the album, they gave me a little bit of context about this. It reminded me that Supper's Ready is broken up into chunks, maybe even movements. Maybe I should go read that comment again before we dive into it in a moment. But I do remember that I need to sort of subdivide my understanding of it, and that would help me appreciate it more, because I know it was the first Genesis track I reacted to on this channel, but I also remember being a bit flabbergasted by all of everything that's in it. Got to get into the right mindset for that. Coming back to Can Utility and Coastliners, though, yeah, dude, this track has got it all. It's catchy, it's infectious, it's groovy, but it's also got a bit of bite to it. In a lot of ways, it kind of reminds me of hard rock, though I certainly don't think it would be classified within that genre. Much like Watchers of the Sky feels kind of djenty while not being djent, I feel the same way here with hard rock. It has the bite, it has the energy, it's just very much still using the instrumentation and the production techniques of an earlier era. But it does feel like the most, I don't know, aggressive isn't the right word, but it's that kind of energy. We get quite a bit of grit from the vocalist towards the end of the track that dude, what? I don't really expect that from him. But it was well placed. It fit with the rising energy of the instrumentation around it. It fit with the rising intensity of the harmonic information around him. It was a neat little addition there. One of those elements where you can feel the vocalist might not have necessarily included that in their idea of what the vocal should sound like, but somewhere along the process, after hearing the music in the section, they just went for it, either on another take or just on that first one, just really feeling the energy and allowing it to flow through them. It is unusual for the Genesis vocalist to go in that direction, at least from my experience, but it was such a good moment there. And also there's a lot more, not belting, but really forward placed projection on this track that feels energetic. There's an electricity to his vocals I don't always get. To me, the vocalist for Genesis tends to be a bit more reserved. I've certainly heard a few tracks where there's more energy. Even within this this album, there have been some moments when I can feel there's just more projection, more drive to the vocal delivery. But for the most part, to me, Genesis is one about storytelling. And while, you're reading a book to a child or someone, you may end up using some more aggressive voices for some specific characters, but generally there's a soft spokenness to the narration, and that's sort of what Genesis is to me. A lot of it feels like storytelling. There is a palatableness to the vocal delivery, one that works fine for a wide audience so that they can hear your story without being turned away from it. Not to say that they're particularly doing this for palatability, that's just how it ends up feeling to me. And I think that this pairs well with their storytelling nature on the musical side as well, and the fact that they love to use folklore and narration within their lyrics as well. Get 'Em Out by Friday is a very straightforward story. Watcher of the Skies, that's a story right there. So this seems to be fairly common. Timetable is, I think, so far their least story-like track lyrically. But they are, to me, storytellers in a way that musicians aren't always. They seem to come at this almost from a theater perspective, which is not the first time I've brought that up, this reaction video, nor is it the first time I brought it up talking about them in general over the past 6 years of diving into their music. So I think having this narrator style neutrality to the vocal delivery fits really well with their music. It's part of their identity to me. And I think that's what makes his use of grit there at the end stand out a bit, and maybe other times that I'm just forgetting as well. After all, I've heard a dozen tracks from them over the course of 6 years. It's kind of spread out. I don't have a lot of time to kind of get a condensed feel for them, other than Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. And now that I'm thinking about that, yeah, there was a little bit more electricity in some of that part of the album. Sorry, in parts of that album. But again, I think it's from a storytelling perspective, not a natural element or a standard component of the vocals, but something to address a specific moment and energy in that tale. I haven't really spoken too much about the vocals. I'm glad I got all this out because they are really integral to my understanding of this band. But the other side of this is the instrumental parts. And as I mentioned during the reaction, everyone kind of gets a chance to shine here. The drummer, I think, is the least focused on instrument. They get a few cool drum fills. There's some interesting accent patterns throughout this track. Generally, though, they are the foundation. They're the glue for everyone else to show off. They hold the song together while everyone else gets the spotlight. Which makes sense. Get 'Em Out by Friday was very drum oriented to me, so this is their moment to kind of take a back seat and allow the spotlight to shine on others. We had some crazy bass riffs in here. We had keyboard parts that went into guitar parts that went into... What else was there? I guess that was about it. I thought there was a third baton pass here. Maybe we started on vocals and then passed it to the keyboard, passed it to the guitar. Like the vocals led us into the instrumental section. That might have been what I was thinking of there. Anyways, these solos are great. The energy is just consistent through the entire middle part of this track. I don't think I have grooved this hard through an entire song, this entire album, which, I mean, I say that because we're coming up on the end, but we're only 4 tracks in. It just feels kind of weird to say that. But this is, I think, one of the most driven tracks. It's just very easy to fall into the groove, just to bob your head to all of it. I think I even had stank face for a little bit towards the end of this track, because of what the bass was doing, and then what the keyboards were doing, and how these two instruments kind of played off of one another, creating sort of theme and then variation on that theme in a sense, while the keyboard allowed the song to grow into the next idea too. And that sort of transition concept is really strong within this track. There's so many decisions in here that are both, yes, they're for the concept of melody. They are for this instrument to be the solo instrument at the moment and to do something cool, but it's always, once again, in service to the music. Where is this song going? This is a solo section. We are spotlighting the keyboard here, but it also needs to take us to the next part. It isn't just there for the keyboardist to show off. It's just a technical part of the overall art. And the art still needs movement. And this is just the whole middle section of this track, like from minute 2.5 or so to 4.5, something like that. Every single decision in here was for this dual purpose. To get the song to the end, we have the story we need to tell here, but also for the bass to show off, for the keyboard to show off, for the guitar to show off. All of these instruments are being able to solo here, to do cool things. But it needs to keep the energy up. We need to continue to rise. We need to escalate this because we have a big ending. We can't stagnate here. And this to me is Genesis's. I hate plurals where the word ends with S. This is Genesis's strength, is really being able to tell a story while still highlighting specific things for many parts of their tracks to be of dual purpose. Are they solos? Yes. Are they storytelling? Yes. Does it all work in service for the track? Yes. And through the whole middle of this song, I was just engaged with this rising energy, the groove of it all. It honestly didn't feel like 6 minutes. Honestly, most of these tracks have not felt their time length. I think Get 'Em Out by Friday was probably the one that felt the longest to me, though it is the longest on the album, save for the Epic. But this one certainly didn't feel its length at all. It was over long before I was ready for it to be. There were some odd rhythmic turns at the end of the track that I don't know if they necessarily worked for me, but sometimes you just got to get a little odd, see what sticks, stand out a little bit. I did enjoy the intro to this, the whole guitar-centric, almost classical sound from the beginning of this song was gorgeous. And, the song picks up after that moment. And we bring in the drums and the bass and we just build the track up to the end. But that opening minute was just absolutely phenomenal. The way that the guitars and vocals danced around each other and had this cool harmonic exploration. I was just down for it. I don't know what the song's about. Some of the other tracks, I've kind of felt their themes emotionally, and that's tied well into the lyrics for the most part. This one, I don't know, it's just energy. It's fun all throughout. There's a little bit of darkness early on that I felt, but generally speaking, I really wasn't that focused too much on listening to the chords and wondering what they are supposed to represent and why they're choosing these and what kind of story they're trying to tell, what this is trying to say. I just kind of turned my brain off, not intentionally, but the song just disarmed me. I really listened to it rather casually and just enjoyed every moment of it. I know I get these comments all the time. You're listening too much with your brain. You're analyzing too much. And you're not enjoying the song for the reasons that it was made for. I know, dude. I see these comments. It's really not the purpose of this channel, and I think for the arguments of this analysis, this track is probably my weakest in getting it and understanding it. But I had the most fun with it. And maybe that's worthwhile, just kind of seeing me, I don't know, kick off the shoes and lean back a little bit and just enjoy a track for the atmosphere it brings. Let's dive into some lyrics on this one. Then we'll check out Horizons and see where that takes us. All right. We start off with a bit of a framing here. There's a book by the sea, pages scattered everywhere, and a cloud. It says a shadow is formed by this cloud. I'm guessing it's a dark cloud, rain, possibly. It says while the sand tries to hold the pages of this book, the rising tide eventually absorbs them, effortlessly claiming them. So you have a story that is sort of lost to time, possibly, figuratively to time anyways. Verse 2, 3, and the bridge appear to be what the story is. It says, they told of one who tired of all, singing praise him, praise him. We heed not flatterers, he cried. By our command waters retreat, show my power, halt at my feet. But the cause was lost, now cold winds blow. So he says there was someone who only wanted people to praise him, and others said that, we don't just blindly follow you. We're not just going to flatter you for no reason. But he says, by our command, waters retreat. Water continues to show up. We have the sea that absorbs this tale, the books, the pages. In the first verse, we have water that's told to retreat. In the second verse, we have a storm showing up in the third verse. I'm not sure why water is so prevalent here. It is just a consistent theme that I don't feel is any more purposeful than if the theme were fire. It's just a consistent element throughout. The third verse says that there's an overcast from the north, fear of storm, and there comes with accusations of this. The waves are surrounding the sinking throne. The people around him, crown him, they sing. Those who love our majesty show themselves, and all bent their knee. So verse 2 was about a bunch of people who were holding this presumably a king-like figure to standards. He says, we're not going to flatter you. You need to show us why you should rule. Whereas verse 3, everyone just bends their knee to him immediately. They just blindly follow him. Very interesting to see the two sides here. However, this show of support comes as the throne sinks into the waves that surround it. Very metaphorical there. Especially since verse 2 says, show my power and halt at my feet. He commands the waters to stay back, asking people to support him, and they don't. But now that he has failed to keep the water back, they do support him. I don't know. I'm a bit lost on that. The outro says, more opened ears and opened eyes, and soon they dared to laugh. See a little man with his face turning red, though his story's often told, you can tell he's dead. So it seems that whatever loyalty they had was gone. They saw him for what he was, a little man with a red face, and laughed at him instead of obeying him, which kind of feels like what verse 2 was about, but verse 3 went in a different direction. There's obviously a passage of time there, but I kind of wish I knew what happened between those moments to change the way that the people that he served, or maybe ruled over if he's a king, what changed their opinion. There's a little bit of extra info here, though. It says that can utility seems to be a wordplay on the name of an old king, King Canute. The Coastliners were his followers, though there's two versions of the story. One is where they're sycophants who need to be shown the truth, which would be like verse 3, And in the other, they expose the delusions of the king, which would be like verse 2 and the outro. It says that Hackett's lyrics seem to weave elements of both tales into one. That is true, but I still don't see how they work. I don't see the through line between these two. I feel like I've said this every time, but I would love to hear other people's interpretations of these lyrics because I'm just missing something here. Verse 3 seems to be out of place with the rest of the track. I didn't really feel any water themes in here, but I would say that the rising excitement and energy of this track fits well with a rising tide swallowing up a city or a town. Everyone turning to the king for hope, and then, well, finding out that he actually has no power. I think the end of the song kind of winding up a bit, maybe awkward as it was. I had mentioned the odd rhythmic phrasings there in the final moments. That lines up well with sort of this illusion being broken. Seeing something that you took for granted only to find out that it was kind of the opposite, and having your worldview shattered and, well, being laughed at too. The king's worldview was also shattered as he felt he had power over these people and wound up not really. There's a lot of ways that we can view the subversive rhythmic elements of the finale in that perspective. Now, I did look up something about this album in particular. Track 4 is the end of side 1, so I'm actually really happy we ended up not going into Horizons. Side 2 is Horizons and Supper's Ready. We are officially at the halfway point of this album, which is funny to say when there's really only one track to go. I will not get over that. That tickles me for some reason. There's just such a lopsided way of divvying up these tracks in here. I also saw that I kind of knew this already, that I call them keyboards. 72 might have had some keyboards, but Genesis, especially at this time, was more well known for using electric organs and the mellotron. It says that Tony Banks also uses electric pianos, which is pretty interesting. But I'd wager for the most part this album is primarily made up of mellotron and electric organ. So I will probably continue to use keyboard interchangeably with those two, even though it's not technically accurate. It is still an electronic instrument, or sorry, an electric instrument that you play with piano-like keys. So just to cover my bases there, I'm sure I'm still going to get a ton of comments about my misuse of the word keyboard there, but it's just a nice catch-all for electronic piano-like instruments. Sorry, electric. I don't know why I keep saying electronic. Although I guess they are kind of, no, electric. Yeah, we're going to stick with that. So with that said, it's time to dive into this. If Horizons goes into Supper's Ready, we will run the entire 25-minute segment together. If not, I do think we're going to stop and talk about Horizons real quick, even though it's so short, simply because 25 minutes is a lot of stuff to remember, especially with Horizons being at the beginning of it. I'm likely to forget what happened there. There's an interesting phrasing here where so much of this feels like it's in 4, but it seems to end the phrase on beat 2. Great use of muted strings. Yeah, not a lot to add to this. Beautiful classical guitar playing right there. All finger picked, I believed. The movements between ideas, the expansion of concepts. It's interesting that within a track so short, we still found theme and variation within it. I believe this entire track is based around one theme. There was a short-lived, maybe 20-second or so B part to the track that focused on a new concept entirely, but I think it was really there just for contrast as we quickly moved back into a variation on the A idea. And I love that. This is incredibly gorgeous. Something that I haven't really talked about too much on this album at all, and it's really just because there's been so many other topics to talk about that this one, it doesn't really have anything that ties into anything larger. It's just an observation of something they do really great, but it's dynamics. These songs, I mean, it's more common back then. We don't hear it too much these days, but volume dynamics. Some of these tracks start off rather quiet, or in the middle of the song, get rather quiet and real quiet. Not the illusion of softer sounds, but actually bringing the volume down from max volume. It is something that I still wish to this day rock would go back to. There's a lot of techniques on the engineering side of making something sound quieter, but if you actually ever look at volume levels, they're the same that they are across the entire track. That's just very common for modern music. I love volume dynamics though. There's something about instruments actually getting quiet that builds a lot of storytelling, its character, its narration. And I think Genesis does that well, and this track in particular does a fantastic job of modifying the volume of this instrument to tell the story. Everything about it just feels right to me. But it's not just volume either. There's control of time in here too, something that I vaguely remember bringing up earlier in the album as well. I think it was a keyboard solo. It might have actually been a piano solo now that I think about it, like acoustic piano. And I talked about how the person playing it was, slowing down and speeding up. It's something you can do easily as a solo instrument. You can control the time feel of your entire section because you don't really have to rely on anyone else to keep up with your tempo. And I think we see a lot of that here done to great effect to really drag out some more evocative or dramatic moments and allow those to ring out before resolving the idea and continuing on with this tale. There's also a beautiful control of note length on here too. Those muted notes at the end of the track worked so well, both as a texture but also rhythm. They chopped up the finale in a way that, I don't know, it introduced. Well, let me state this first. I originally thought it was an accident, a flub left in, something more common in the older days when you couldn't just, erase a single note of a take and replace it with a different take. I mean, I guess you could. Y'all have introduced me to tape splicing in the past, which still sounds like a bonkers endeavor. But I don't think you'd ever do it for a single note like we can do so easily today with digital mixing. But then it was done again and again and again, and it became a core part of the song. I love that. We hadn't heard any of these muted tones anywhere else in the track, and here they are wrapping the song up as if something that was originally there is missing now. The rhythm, the melody, it's all the same as it was before, but it's portrayed differently now. This is the whole concept of theme and variation that I was talking about just a moment ago. The same chord progression kind of exists throughout this entire thing. We just hear it in different styles, sounds, textures, sometimes different notes, changing a little piece of it up while not changing out the whole. It's just a beautiful track here, and I think a nice sort of palate cleanser. Supper's Ready is a massive undertaking. It is going to be this huge, proggy epic, and we just got through something a bit more straightforward. Listen to something beautiful, single guitar, and use that to help prepare for what's about to come. There are no lyrics for this one. I think Horizons is a great title for it. It seems to evoke the concept of possibility. As far as you can see, there is possibility down to the horizon. If you get higher, your horizon point gets further away. This song is full of potential. It feels gentle, but also curious. And I think the use of theme and variation, showing how curiosity can alter something simple at the start into things more complex harmonically and melodically as we get through, even becoming technical to play. Having to mute specific strings that you hadn't muted prior is additional complexity to the piece itself. And through all of this, we find ourselves seeing potential, an existing idea, and a variety of things it could be. I think harmonically and through the title as well, we focus on those concepts too. It's a very cohesive idea. With that said, supper is ready. Well, not for me. It's still quite early in the afternoon for me, but let's check out some Supper's Ready for a second time and see if any of this rings a bell for me.
Walking across the sitting room, I turn the television off. Sitting beside you, I look into your eyes.
A little bit of uplift, but overall rather ominous here.
Fades in the nighttime. I swear I saw your face change. It didn't seem quite right, and it's hello, babe, with your guardian eyes so blue. Hey, my baby, don't you know our love is true? Coming closer with our eyes, a distance falls around our bodies. Out in the garden, the moon seems very bright. 6 saintly shrouded men move across the lawn slowly. The 7th walks in front with a cross.
Still sticking with this mystery sound overall.
Hey babe, your supper's waiting for you. Hey my baby, don't you know our love is true?
The jump up on the second syllable of baby, both times we fit this chorus. Very interesting choice there.
It's good to feel you again. It's been a long, long time.
I love these two guitar lines, and they've really kept this section of the track fairly rooted as the vocals and the keyboard kind of explore their own ideas.
I know a fireman who looks after the fire. Can't you see his footwear? Yes, he's here again. Can't you see his footwear?
That rising note. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da.
He's a supersonic scientist. He's a guaranteed eternal sanctuary man. Look into my mouth, he cried.
The first part was rather mysterious, but this feels accomplished.
I bet my life you'll walk inside. Hand in hand, land in glad.
Content might also be another good word for this section.
He's a guaranteed eternal sanctuary.
Yeah, so breaking that 8 up into 3-3-2. Common phrasing there. Love the flute. We've kind of returned to something a bit more, not necessarily mysterious, but I'm curious about. It needs more information.
We walked across the fields to see the children of the West. We saw a host of dark-skinned warriors standing still below the ground. Waiting for battle.
Lots of snare in here.
Fights begun, they've been released. Killing for peace. Bang, bang, bang. Bang, bang, bang. And they're giving me a wonderful potion, 'cause I cannot contain my emotion. I didn't know I'm feeling good. Something tells me I better activate my prayer capsule.
Ooh. Nice call and response between the vocals and that keyboard line. Yeah, see, it's quiet. We've lost a good 25% of our volume there. Like a train?
Wandering in the chaos the battle has left, we climb up the mountain of human flesh to a plateau of green.
Melancholy? Maybe a defeat of some kinds?
Trees full of life. A young figure sits still by a pool. He's been stamped human bacon by some butchery tool. He is you. Social security took care of this lad. We watch in reverence as Narcissus is turned to a flower. A flower? If you go down to Willow Farm to look for butterflies, flutterbugs, gutterflies.
Very sharp rhythms.
It's full of surprise. Everyone lies like a fox on the rocks. And the musical box. Oh, there's mom and dad and good and bad, and everyone's happy to be here. There's Winston Churchill dressed in drag. He used to be a British flag. Plastic bag. What a drag.
Very Oingo Boingo.
The bricks was a brick, the brick was an egg, the egg was a bird.
Highways with sweet little things, they're hot in your tail.
Haven't you heard?
Protect you to a human being.
Yes, we're happy as fish and gorgeous as geese and wonderfully clean in the morning.
I love that little drum part there, the triplet.
Everything, we're growing everything. We've got some in, we've got some out. We've got some wild things floating about. Everyone, we're changing everyone. You name them all, we've had them here. And the real stars are still to appear. Feel your body melt.
Man to man to man.
To dad, dad in the office, dad in the office. You're all full of ball, dad to dad.
Dum to mum, mum diddly washing,
You're all full of ball. Let me hear your lies. We're living this up to the eyes.
So he shouts all change, and we shift into very upbeat.
Mama, I want you now. As you listen to my voice.
And now we're back to the old sound that was a bit darker, heavier.
You've been here all the time.
Like there's still that bounciness underneath it.
Like what you got, you're under the soil. It's deep in the soil. So we'll end with a whistle and end with a bang. And all of us
There's that triplet part again.
says.
kind of like an alarm. We have the drone in the background though. The lonely section. A beautiful little line over there. Kind of reminds me of harp, but I'm pretty sure it's probably a guitar. Marching snare? Strange rhythm, but I think this because we pushed into 9 here. Very strange. So it's an odd accent pattern on top of an odd time signature. What in the world? Ooh, them double bass kicks though. It's just very confusing. It's designed to get you turned around. Everyone is doing their own rhythmic idea. And the phrasings are so long too. It's not like you can get a grasp after every 9 or 18 beats. I'd almost say it's polymetric on multiple layers, where it takes a solid 54 beats for everything to line up again, maybe.
He's getting out the marrow in your backbone. I'm a
Ooh. Those chords are pointing in a very different... Oh, there's Dark and Mysterious again, though. But it seems like there is a light. The chord they're trying to point towards that escape.
And it's, hey babe, with your guardian eyes so blue. Hey my baby, don't you know our love is true? I've been so far from here, far from your loving arms. Now I'm back again. And maybe it's gonna work out fine. Can't you feel our souls ignite?
Oh, I'm loving that guitar work.
Shedding ever-changing colors in the darkness of the fading night. Like the river joins the ocean as the germ in the sea grows. We finally be freed to get back home.
There's a smoothness to this section too, which is interesting.
And he's crying with a loud voice. This is the supper of the mighty one. Lord of lords, King of kings, has returned to lead his children home, to take them to the new Jerusalem.
That is a wild finale. I think part of the way I read it is due to what I've grown up around. This is something I've talked about in the past, is that, an extreme example is the way that a lot of Baroque music written for the church is now frequently found on Halloween discs to play in your personal haunted homes, haunted houses, not how. We've got real ghosts here. It's a haunted home. No, haunted houses. And it's just because those chords, those harmonic devices have just changed their meaning across cultures. And so maybe on a probably much smaller scale, the ending to this might have said something differently in the 70s than it does to me, being generally a 90s kid, but also really coming into my formative years in the 2000s. Because the end of this track doesn't feel as positive as I think it's trying to. There's the guitar part. The guitar solo itself feels like a type of it's a mix of joy and like exhaustion, release of tension, like to finally throw the weight from your shoulders and relax. It's a little mix of that, of finally having completed a journey, and it's this bittersweet feeling. But then we have the the synth that's just panning back and forth on these really, I don't know if I should use really as an adjective here, or not an adjective, but an exacerbating word, something to expand the original descriptor. It's kind of tense, man. It's not quite in the panic chord realm. It's not incredibly dissonant, but there's plenty of dissonance in there for it to almost feel like an alarm to me. In fact, when it came in, it kind of reminded me of something close to an American ambulance sound. And then it just continued to lean into chords that still kind of carried that quality. And the panning back and forth kind of felt anxious to me too, like pacing. Maybe the end of this track is supposed to be this mixed idea of relaxation and joy, but also high alert for some reason. I don't remember the story to this anywhere near as much as I remember Get 'Em Out by Friday. Even the few lines I picked up while I was listening to the track, I would not even begin to be able to describe what this song is about. I did laugh at this line about I don't know, it's something religious, like the seven trumpets blasting, but they were blasting rock and roll into your soul or something like that. I can't wait to get to that line and get the context on it, because out of context, that's just hilarious. But still, like, so much of the finale told me, this is it. You finished this massive task. You can rest now. And then this just alarm sound just panning side to side. I'm like, dude, that is not putting me at rest. But again, it could just be, I mean, first of all, US ambulance, maybe that sound by itself is a cultural thing that I'm interpreting there. But it's also, 50 years divorced too. What kind of sounds meant specific things then? Well, generally it's going to be the same now. It's just could be slightly different. So I found that to be a rather interesting way to wrap this up. Very mixed finale for me personally. Once again, I toss the mic to y'all. Let me know what you felt the ending was telling you. We'll see if that's different from my interpretation of it. I took notes on this one simply because it's 23 minutes of music and there's very few through lines in ideas. We don't really revisit any concepts, recontextualize old ideas, or return back to them. Each section seems to have its own verse-chorus idea. There's multiple instrumental parts in here which progress the story through instrument only. But once we've left an idea, we don't ever really come back to it. And I've kind of divvied this up into 9 parts, give or take. And what I generally have written down here is mystery into contentment into celebration, which uses a transition idea that reduces the scope of things and introduces a train-like sound. So maybe transportation or movement in general. This little transition section is supposed to imply that we have changed area, which moves into a melancholic defeat that pushes into a dark, bouncy section that everybody change goes into a fun, upbeat section that does return back to the bouncy, dark part. Then we have a very extended section that kind of goes through a few different ideas. This is the only part of the track where I feel like there's any sort of subtle evolution rather than locking into a concept. We go from something drony and noisy into a lonely flute that builds into a rock section with a confusing rhythm that then uses the flute again to introduce some subtle positivity before bringing that confusing rhythm back, pushing into a big ending that's incredibly vibrant, that feels like finding your place in the world and introduces joy before having a noise adjacent fade out, which I've already talked about that interesting detail there. it's a journey. That's absolutely true. And when it comes to stuff like this, it is infinitely more difficult to come to a solid conclusion on my own. I think I've done a pretty good job over the course of this album showcasing my understanding of music and showcasing Genesis's writing capabilities, of their forte of injecting the narrative into the music in such a clear and detailed way that I know what these songs are about without even hearing the lyrics or without even knowing the lyrics. Get 'em Out by Friday is the one point in here that I guess that doesn't apply to, since I already knew the story to that one. But tracks 1, 2, 4, and 5, I think I've done a pretty good job of explaining my take on the music and then having the lyrics, when they're there, back them up okay, well enough. And so when I say I don't really have a strong grasp on what all of this is supposed to mean, it's not so much calling out my skills, though absolutely maybe somebody would be able to digest 23 minutes of music and understand an entire novella's worth of storytelling through that. I'm not at that level, apparently. But it's also because there's just so much here that even taking the notes and looking at it all the way through, the ideas are just so, well, they're all over the place for sure, but they really could tell any sort of story. When you only have one or two atmospheres to a track, it's easier to get a read on that than trying to piece together what 9 to 13 separate atmospheres are supposed to say in conjuncture. So, conjunction, that's the word. I almost got it confused with conjecture. That is not what I needed. But I do have a grasp of the emotional maturity and evolution across this track. I'm fairly confident in my emotional reads of each of these. I find it really interesting that despite taking, I don't know, 15 specific notes or 15 specific descriptors across this track, that there's no repetition. There wasn't a single section where I reused a word, which I find really impressive because that shows the depth of their emotional writing. It isn't necessarily that there are, well, let me rephrase that. There are multiple sections within this track that are high points, emotionally high points, and more positive. There's multiple sections that are more negative emotions, lower points in here. And yet, each of them is unique. We have mystery, we have melancholy, we have general darkness, maybe antagonism. We have noisy sections that can induce a feeling of being lost. They're all rather negative. They're all kind of darker in a sense, but all of them are distinct too. Genesis has a phenomenal understanding of not just emotion in storytelling, but how to evoke that through music, through production and composition. Specific instruments, particularly from the keyboards, the organs, whatever, but also from guitar tone, from vocal delivery. How can we create specific sounds on this album, or I guess specifically on this track, that really allude to what we want to say? And they understand all of this well enough to dive into it and do it in such a clear way. It's not like I was confused most of the time when we get to the end and, oh snap, that was mysterious. Like, no, I mean, it's that right from the start. And it's never dull either. I think the only part in this track, which, I mean, if y'all remember back to track 1, it's the heavy rhythmic part. What I have down as section 8. Yep, section 8 is the confusing rhythmic part of this track. This section went on for a really long time, and we had a lot of ideas in it. But well, actually, let's talk about that. I do want to bring up some specific sections before we hit the lyrics, and this is a good part to start with, I suppose. This part was wild. Technically, it is incredibly impressive. I talked about it being polyrhythmic, which is where there's multiple time signatures happening simultaneously. I'm not 100% sure on this because I don't have data to back it up. It's more of a gut feeling. When I listen to this, it feels polyrhythmic in that each of the instruments seems to be on a different pattern set. The section as a whole, as was introduced at the beginning of this part, is in 9/4, I would probably say. It's a 9-beat phrase regardless. I counted it out in quarter notes, so I'd give it 9/4. 9/8 is more common, but it just didn't feel like a 9/8 to me. It was too slow for that. But we have 9 beats regardless. It was kind of confusing already with just the first instrument, but once the drums came in, it was even more confusing because the drum accent points were not where you would expect that. A 9-beat phrase, you could break up into 3 groups of 3, which is pretty standard. You could break it up into 2 groups of 4.5, which is a little less standard, but quite doable. We would just hear a shift from downbeat accents to offbeat accents. The drummer doesn't do either of these, and right here, without having written this down on sheet music and really dove into the rhythmic components of it, I couldn't tell you what kind of phrasing they were using. As far as I can tell, it wasn't something that was static within just a single 9-beat phrase. I don't even know if it was static within an 18-beat phrase, which would be 2 bars of this. I am fairly confident that this was a much larger pattern. Within that, we also had the guitars, which were doing their own rhythmic patterns as well, where the accent points are within this phrasing. It was to the point where even after knowing where a downbeat was, where beat 1 was, which I'll tell you was really freaking difficult to find where 1 was in any of this. But once I came to a place where I was fairly confident I had found 1, after counting, I think I was in the 30s or 40s, I still hadn't found that 1 again where everything lined up. This may have just been an incredibly linear idea made up of several shorter ostinatos. As I mentioned during it, it is designed entirely to make you feel lost, to get you turned around. The bass, the vocals, even the keyboardist eventually gets in on this, and there are just so many rhythmic layers happening that finding a beat 1 anywhere in here is impossible. There's basically 0 landmarking unless you start from the beginning, which is a very clear start to this. That's the only clear one I really get out of any of this. Otherwise, you just get lost in it. And I really do think that's the purpose of it. It is an obtuse section of the track, absolutely, but it's also heavier and darker in texture. I don't really think there's too much harmonically here because a lot of it is just kind of single note pedal tone stuff. The guitars kind of bounce between 2 notes sometimes. Very djenty, actually. But without the groove that djent tends to fall into. This one's designed to be confusing rather than easy to groove to. But there's just not a lot of harmonic information here. So a lot of it comes down to texture of the instrument tones. And it just feels dark. Not ominous, not dangerous, just dark. Like walking around in a cave without a flashlight. Or a torch, since, this is Genesis. We'll use the proper terminology there. I think it just comes together really well thematically, but that doesn't diminish how absolutely bonkers this is technically. So I found that to be an interesting section that simply just went on too long. That took up a solid 2.5 minutes at least, maybe more. If I'm going to be honest, time dilation happened there. That was probably shorter than I thought it was, but it felt like a massive chunk of this track. I was going to say 5, and I was like, there's no way it's 5 minutes. How about we lowball that a little bit? Probably make it more realistic. But But I did know when we got out of it and I looked, and I was like, oh, geez, there's only like 3 minutes left. We were in that forever. I honestly don't know that. It just felt like we were there for a long time. So I found that section to be rather interesting. There are 2 sections in here of joy. We have the big finale that feels like winding up where you want it to be, but then we also have this sort of celebration in in moment 3 that I thought worked incredibly well. And I think it's interesting how both of them are different. They're both about celebrating something, but one is, I don't know, less taxing emotionally, physically. Like I mentioned, the end of this track feels like a massive weight off of your shoulders, like the end of a big journey. You finally can say, I've done it, but it took a lot of effort to do. Whereas the celebration in the beginning of the track, a few minutes in, that one felt more like a party. You know, you put some balloons up, you go get a cake from your local grocery store, and people show up and you eat food and you enjoy, right? Does it take work to start that and to get it all done? Yeah, absolutely. You can't just throw a party without any preparation. But the task is infinitely smaller than getting through the entirety of this song and whatever scope of journey that implies. And so they're both celebratory, but incredibly different. And this comes down to instrumentation. It comes down to harmonic information. This is once again just Genesis showing off how great they are at understanding emotional qualities through music. So I really enjoyed that duality there, seeing 2 sides of basically the same coin here. That was fantastic. There's also the section that is the everyone change part of this, which I thought was phenomenal because they found a way to keep a bounciness consistent throughout both of those. But the 2 sections are vastly different. One is upbeat and joyous, almost like someone skipping down the road, and the other one is bouncy but dark. I think this was the part where I called out the Oingo Boingo comparison, which, of course, it'd probably be in the inverse, seeing as I'm pretty sure this came out before Oingo Boingo was doing their stuff. But, yeah, there's just something darkly bouncy about it where it's kind of fun, but not in a good way. I don't know. Maybe there's a little safety to it too. And of course, Oingo Boingo, you got Danny Elfman, and I'm immediately thinking of Tim Burton films, particularly because of Danny Elfman's consistent soundtrack work within them. But it's that sort of safely dangerous darkness that I think works really well in this moment. And its juxtaposition with the fun, carefree, upbeat is fantastic. Again, in the details of understanding what needs to be changed for this and what needs to stick around, but also kind of comical as we jump back and forth between these ideas, because after this bouncy section, we return back to that darker bounciness. It's very rare for me to write bouncy dark and bouncy upbeat as 2 sections of a song, and I think they pulled it off with ease. The last thing I think I want to bring up here is just general writing. This song is an incredible undertaking, and I think they did a phenomenal job with it. There's actually more consistency to it than I expected, given some of the stuff I've heard from Genesis in the past. This is really well done. I mean, even if you take into account the first 3 sections, mystery into contentment into celebration, there was some really smooth transitions as we moved between them. In fact, getting out of the mystery into the contentment was basically indistinguishable. Part of me wondered if I should even call them 2 separate ideas, but I stuck with the concept that if the emotion changed, I would give it a new section number. But all in all, that might as well be one concept with how closely related they are. Musically, there is this cool transition period between the 2 of them. We saw the same thing moving from the celebration into the melancholic defeat, as there was that size reduction into the train horn sound. and this helped kind of get into that next idea. I don't think it was as smooth of a transition as moving from mystery to contentment, but it absolutely worked. It helped adjust me to the new scope and atmosphere of where we were going. Not every single section is like that. There's quite a few harsh transitions throughout this track that kind of make me feel more at home with Genesis. It's more of what I expect from them. But I still want to, pat them on the back, if you will, give them praise for the sections that were smoother. It makes the sections that are jarring stand out as contrast rather than just the way things are. And it makes them feel more like intentional choices rather than a fallback idea. Which might not be the best way to look at harsh transitions, but more often than not, it feels like people use them because that's what progressive rock and metal does. So you just do it. And I find it to be one of the weakest parts of those genres. Just personally, subjectively, nothing objective about that. That's just my relationship to those sounds. But I'm really happy to see so many sections just build into another rather than just wildly dive into it. And just some final praise for this album as a whole. Dude, every bit of it is so well crafted. The melody lines, the harmonies, the textures, it goes through a lot of different sounds too. Usually when it comes to an album like this, where every song kind of has its own identity, I get to a point where I kind of don't know when I would listen to it. There are some albums that are so diverse that a few songs would be great, but other times I'd have to be in a totally different mood to enjoy some other tracks from it. While every track here has its own identity and they are all quite unique, it all feels homogenous somehow. And I'm not entirely sure why. I don't have an answer to what they did that makes this have that sort of magic that stitches all this down into one experience, but it does. I feel like all of these work together well. Maybe it's just that Genesis magic there. I don't know. Let me hit some lyrics on this one, and then we're going to wrap this video up. I don't even know if I should attempt this. I'm very tempted to just say that's the end of the video. Y'all tell me what this track is about. Because honestly, I have not a strong idea of it. The first part, and there's only 7, which is very different from the 9 to 12, whatever I had, I don't remember, that I wrote down. But this only has, I'm going to say 7. Yep. This only has 7 sections to it. The first one is called Lover's Leap, and it's about 2 people, our protagonist and presumably his lover. And he says it's a pretty normal day. He walks across and turns the TV off and looks into your eyes. And I swear I saw your face change. It didn't seem quite right. And you said, "Hello, babe, with your guardian eyes so blue. Don't you know our love is true?" So I'm a little intrigued. What's going on with this person? Why is their face contorted or just different? Why is it unfamiliar? Then it just says, "Come closer." And he looks out the window and sees 7 men, shrouded, walking across his lawn, the one in front holding a cross. We see the chorus again. "Your supper's waiting for you. Don't you know that our love is true?" It says, "I've been so far from here, from your warm arms, and it's good to feel you again. It's been a long time, hasn't it?" And that's it. We don't get an explanation as to why this other person is acting so awkwardly. What's with the ominous men outside? This entire idea is gone. We will never return to this. I don't even know. The next part, the guaranteed eternal sanctuary man. says, I know a farmer who looks after the farm with water clear, who cares for all his harvest, and a fireman who looks after the fire. We then skip to a different perspective. Can't you see he's fooled you all? Share his peace, sign the lease, but he's the supersonic scientist, the guaranteed eternal sanctuary man. Look into my mouth, he cries. I bet you'll walk inside, hand in hand with a spoonful of miracle. He's the guaranteed eternal sanctuary. And then that's cut off. We never return to these folk either. Part 3 is called Ignaton and Itzikon and their band of merry men. This looks at a battle between, as is described, a host of dark-skinned warriors. They are the children of the West. They are fighting for peace. The word bang as an onomatopoeia is said several times here, and it says that our narrator is being given a wonderful potion because they can't contain their emotions, so they feel like they should activate their prayer capsule. There is a wild guitar solo here and then a celebratory sound as it states the foe has met their fate. The order of rejoicing and dancing has come from our warlord. So presumably, the dark-skinned warriors of the West won this battle. Part 4, how dare I be so beautiful? I am incredibly confused about. It is one stanza. It says that after the battle, they climb up a mountain of human flesh and find a plateau of green grass and trees full of life and a young figure by the pool who has a stamp on them that says human bacon. It then says that this person is you and that Social Security took care of them. He then turns into a flower. Part 5 is called Willow Farm. Things get wild here. Very Dr. Seussian as far as the language goes. Just look at this opening line. If you go down to Willow Farm to look for butterflies or flutterbys or gutterflies, open your eyes. It's full of surprise. Everyone lies like the fox on the rocks in the musical box. There's mom and dad and good and bad, and everyone's happy to be here. If not Seussian, it certainly begins to drift over into Lewis Carroll territory as well. It is certainly psychedelic and word salad, but it sounds fantastic, very gong-like, where the sounds of the words are more important than what they're actually saying. We then proceed on. It's Winston Churchill, dressed in drag. He used to be a British flag, a plastic bag. What a drag. The frog was a prince, the prince was a brick, the brick was an egg, the egg was a bird. Haven't you heard? It's just psychedelic nonsense. None of this makes any sense to me. We get to a point where it says, feel your body melt, mum to mud and mad to dad, dad diddly office, you're all full of ball. Mum diddly washing, you're all full of ball, let me hear your lies. This is the part that was dark and upbeat that shifted to, I guess, dark and bouncy that shifted to fun and upbeat and then back. It then says that we are all the soil. We are all deep in the soil. And it will all end with a whistle and a bang. From here we go into part 6, The Apocalypse in 9/8, co-starring the delicious talents of Gabby Ratchet. Maybe Gable? Yeah, I think that's an L. Gable Ratchet. So Apocalypse in 9/8, I said it was 9/4. Certainly got the 9-beat phrasing right on this. Now we have Pied Pipers. Well, I guess the Pied Piper. Taking children underground. We have dragons coming out of the sea. Shimmering silver heads of wisdom. We then move into apocalyptic, like Christian apocalypse, Revelation. 666 is no longer alone. There's 7 trumpets blowing sweet rock and roll. Out of nowhere, Pythagoras is here, looking at the full moon, or maybe a reflection of it in the looking glass, bringing Lewis Carroll back into this. And then we come back to the opening chorus. Hey babe, with your guardian eyes so blue, don't you know our love is true? I don't think musically we recalled it, but lyrically we do bring something back from earlier. It says I'm back again, and it's gonna work out fine. Part 7, as sure as eggs is eggs. So with full certainty is what this is about. I'm just gonna read these. Can't you feel our souls ignite, shedding ever-changing colors in the darkness of the fading night? Like the river joins the ocean as the germ in a seed grows, we've finally been free to get back home. There's an angel standing in the sun, and he's crying with a loud voice, this is the supper of the mighty one. Lord of lords, King of kings has returned to lead his children home, to take them to the New Jerusalem. And then the noisy finale that feels like it's supposed to be the end of a journey, joyful and finding your place, but also, to me at least, uncertain about that, which is funny given that this track is as sure as eggs are eggs, about pure certainty here. There is a small allusion back to the lovers from the beginning, as if they went on this journey together and experienced life, psychedelically, if you will, but found a lot of what life was supposed to mean. I suppose the idea of growing as seeds, becoming the soil, kind of alludes to that. But in the final moments, when I really thought it was going to be about how much these two people loved being with each other, that as much as life could offer, they're happy just being with each other. The final verse brings it all back to Christianity, which we've only really touched on a little bit here with the revelation component in part 6. The two people talk about how they're free to go back home, and that home is the children's home of New Jerusalem, the children of God. And I don't know. I'm very lost about what is all of this. There are certainly parts of it that I could read as metaphor of understanding life, humanity, the humanity of life, the cycle of life, the spirituality of life. But there's just as many, maybe if not more, that seem to just be kind of random. And some of this, I think, is even supported with some statements made by keyboardist Tony Banks about, was that 8 years ago in 2018? He says in early parts, the acoustic part of this track was a piece that he had written on guitar, thought it had great atmosphere and that it could go somewhere else. He found it to be a good follow-up to a track called The Music Box, which they had written previously. He says we were doing some cool stuff, and he thought of this other song that Peter had started to write called Willow Farm, which is part 4 of this track. He says, we were doing this little bit here in Supper's Ready, and I thought it would be a fantastic place if we just stopped the song suddenly and just go into Willow Farm, a really ugly little downward chord sequence that happens in the front of it. I thought it would be such great contrast. So we have a couple of ideas here that seem to be completely disparate from one another. We have this lick, we have the larger idea of Supper's Ready, and we have Willow Farm. And in a decision, they just smash them all together. Now, I will say musically, this kind of works. It takes me on a journey, even if, as I mentioned earlier, I still don't really have a strong idea of what that narration is. It's simply just a long journey. And there are some smooth transitions here, but if any of these tracks already had lyrics written for them, that might explain why there's so little lyrical transitions between this, why they all feel vignette-y. It really isn't until the end of the track that any sort of larger theme is tried to be stated in any way. So, I don't know. I still think musically this is a tour de force, an incredibly amazing track that does a fantastic job of doing a lot of ideas over a long course of time and finds a way to make it all cohesive. Maybe a little less cohesive as we move towards the end of the track, but still generally an enjoyable experience. But lyrically, it is so all over the place that I have such a hard time understanding any of it. And then in the middle, it just becomes gibberish, which, yeah, there's that. So like I stated earlier, I don't have a strong idea of what this is. We just kind of ran through it. Y'all got the Cliff Notes version of this, if y'all are old enough to remember Cliff Notes. You got the AI summary version. Oh, that doesn't quite fit. At least Cliff Notes were handmade. We don't have a modern form of Cliff Notes anymore. I was going to say, supper's ready for dummies, but that's also probably dating myself a bit. But I don't have an extended explanation for this. I can't break it down and analyze it and tell you all what it's supposed to mean because it doesn't really mean much to me at all. So we are going to wrap this up. These are my thoughts on Genesis's Foxtrot. What did you think of this? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this? Let me know. Put all of that and anything else you'd like to add into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you'd like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That'll wrap it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. UTC. As usual, for Sundays at least, we're going to do a live stream about 2.5 hours long of just checking out some cool music and having some good conversation. Otherwise, Monday I'll be back at the usual time of 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.